Good evening, and thank you for joining our discussion about the AAUW National Bylaws amendments. Our speakers tonight include Sue Barley, who's a director on the AAUW National Board. She's a member of several AAUW branches, including 2 in St. Louis and 1 in Florida, the Greater Naples branch. We also have Sally Miller, the AAUW Illinois State President, who is a member of the Champaign-Urbana branch. The proposed national bylaws include 3 amendments. The first amendment suggests staggered terms of offices for the AAUW Board of Directors on a 3-year rotation, which involves electing 1/3 of the board each year. And Sue can explain some of the rationale behind this.
All right. So this has been talked about for many a year because we've always had the danger, what I call the danger, of having everybody on the board I'm hearing all kinds of things. Can you hear me?
We're fine now.
Hello? All right. There has been the real big concern of having almost, if not everybody, new on the board. And by doing staggered terms, the idea would be that a third of the board would be new each year. What this will really have to have happen is that we will be voting every year. And there is a plan how to put this all into process so that we work up to the point where we get to the point where we do a third of the board each year. I think this is really important. It is always really good to have people who have experience from the past board so that they can carry on, and also to have the new people with new insight with each board. So that's why we are promoting this amendment.
Thank you. The proposed amendment number 2 allows up to 5 directors to serve who are not AAUW members.
Yes. So what people need to remember is that the AAUW National Board is very different from a branch or a state AAUW board. For states and branches, the board members really do everything. They determine the direction they're going into, they direct programming, they do fundraising, they do advocacy efforts, they do scholarship awards, and on and on and on. They are doing the actual work. The AAUW National Board functions more as a corporate board, meaning their role is one of fiduciary responsibility, overseeing the direction of the organization, monitoring programs and finances, participating in strategic thinking to provide organizational direction linked with sustainable resources and measurable outcomes, and so forth. We feel that by having, we could expand our influence and deepen our impact if we could add board members from outside of AAUW that are prominent leaders in equity work. And when I think about this, I think about my work on the Girl Scout board in my council in the St. Louis area. There was always people who were from the community, people from other nonprofits, people who had expertise, besides the people who, like me, were Girl Scout adult volunteers. This was the only way, the best way for the Girl Scouts to make any kind of impact and always be looking and outside of themselves. So that's why I'm really supporting this amendment. I think this would be a great addition, a wonderful and a much needed addition to AAUW.
Thank you, Sue. The third amendment asks to remove the degree requirement for membership in AAUW and instead welcomes anyone who supports our mission. But this is the amendment that's causing the most discussion.
Right.
Yes. Sue, what would you say?
Okay. Okay. Well, you know that AAUW has been very interested in working very hard with diversity and inclusion. And in fact, we have a diversity policy which says there shall be no barriers to full participation in this organization on the basis of gender, race, creed, age, sexual orientation, national origin, disability, or class. But something's missing there because there is something that is a barrier to full participation in this organization, and that is this educational degree thing. So you must hold an educational degree to be a member of AAUW, and that is at odds with our efforts at inclusion and equity, and it's counterproductive to recruiting members of diverse race, ethnicity, and younger members. We cannot promote equity for all women and girls if the organization maintains this requirement. We are advocates for equity for women and girls, and we are fighting and hoping for this equity. And then, when people get excited to hear about what we're doing and want to join us, I have to stop and say, but wait a minute. Do you have a degree? Do you have at least a two-year degree? How can I say that to people? How can I say you cannot fight with us for equity? And we don't allow equity in our own organization. And this is becoming a problem or a concern, especially in this climate where there are many organizations, corporations, and so forth supporting equity for women. And when they hear or read about AAUW and find out that we are an elitist group, that really we are not we say we're promoting equity, but we are not equitable ourselves. We are losing funding. We are losing other groups who might collaborate with us. This is becoming a major problem. And I'm saying this is for our image, or this is who we are. It's not really, some people say, oh, you're just trying to get more members. I don't think that is the purpose at all. I think it is, if we're going to fight for equity, why in the world aren't we ourselves equitable? I think that's it.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, next I'd like to introduce Sally Miller, who is going to give the point of view from the AAUW Illinois leadership. Sally Miller, who is the current AAUW Illinois president, and Jennifer Urish, who is the incoming Illinois AAUW state president, have written a statement with their views, and Sally is going to read that statement for us this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. Jennifer Urish, who's the president-elect, and I, who am the current president, would like for AAUW Illinois members to vote on the proposed bylaw changes. That's one issue. Voting is important, and frequently people do not vote. We want to let you know our perspective on opening up AAUW membership to anyone who supports our mission and pays annual dues. The National Board has recommended this, and Jennifer and I are very much in support. Over the long and storied history, AAUW's mission and membership requirements have evolved with our successes and with the times. Marion Talbot, who founded AAUW, along with other founding members, created the Association of Collegiate Alumni to remove the roadblocks to getting an education, since it was uncommon for women to have college degrees at that time. Today, non-degreed women work in every industry and field. If Marion Talbot formed AAUW today, it would be hard to believe she would prevent these women from fighting for equity. AAUW has always been dedicated to breaking down barriers that prevent women from achieving their goals. And it is important that AAUW recognizes the power of welcoming anyone who supports our mission, as is common practice with mission-based nonprofits. AAUW cannot promote equity for all women and girls if the organization maintains exclusivity membership requirements. In addition to aligning closely with our mission, eliminating the membership requirement will promote a more inclusive and diverse membership. While a college education is important, education comes in many forms, including career technical education and on-the-job training. By requiring a college degree, we are significantly limiting potential membership of those who might otherwise be strong partners and advocates for our mission. We're all familiar with people who are in the United States and don't have a college education, but indeed for their children, that is what they want, a college education. So it's reasonable that they might be interested in joining AAUW. Many members and stakeholders encourage AAUW to seek new funding from corporations, foundations, and other grant-making organizations, but the current restrictions for membership mean AAUW doesn't meet basic inclusion language required for many of these funders. In other words, we are prospectively leaving important dollars for our future on the table. So we ask that you carefully consider this rationale as you vote on the bylaw amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I don't know if anyone has any comments to make up till now, but Ruth Holst, who is the current president of the Chicago branch, has offered to discuss arguments against the amendments at this stage. Ruth, what have you got to say?
Okay, am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good, good. Yes, I'm hoping that those folks who are on the call will feel free to put your questions, comments into the chat box. I went to the national website today to take a look at sort of the summary of all the comments that came in on these three proposals. The first proposal, basically, most of the comments were very positive, and you know, unless there's somebody out there who really wants to discuss the first proposal, I think that's we probably don't want to take time to do that tonight because it's pretty non-controversial. The second proposal, which has to do with non-members on the board, was a little bit more controversial. As you heard from Sue, the benefits of having additional up to 5 non-members on the board would bring additional expertise and information and diversity to our board. And I think it would, and I think it could potentially, if you were able to bring in somebody, a very prominent person with high visibility, it would significantly increase the visibility of AAUW as an organization. Some of the comments, but some of the comments that were negative about proposal number 2 had to do, a number of people felt that having up as many as 5 members members of the board be non-members of the association meant that as much as a third of the board would be non-members. And one of the suggestions that I saw from a couple of people was to reduce the number to 3, so that it's not, so that the impact wouldn't be quite as great. Another person suggested, because one of the arguments was that by bringing in non-members, we could be bringing in people with business expertise or marketing expertise, fundraising, that sort of thing. One of the suggestions from one or more members was that the nominating committee should simply work harder to find members of the organization who have that kind of business expertise and this additional skill that we're looking for in the board. Another comment that I saw about proposal number 2 was, you know, why would you want somebody on the board making decisions on behalf of the association when they've chosen not to be members of the organization? And then finally, I think another sort of a more cynical comment that many people made was that this appears to be a financial decision to bring, with the idea that we would be bringing wealthy donors, potentially wealthy donors who are connected to funding sources onto the board as a way to bring more money into the association, which may actually be part of the reason that that this proposal is being made. Let me pause here and entertain any questions or comments that any of you have. Please feel free to chat, to enter something into the chat box if you want to comment on any of these things. There were some additional, what I would call nasty comments that were put on the national website, you know, that I really don't plan to go through, because they tended to be, the tone of the messages were things like, well, why would you want to have somebody on the board who's not a member of the organization? You know, the tone wasn't particularly positive, and I don't know that we need to talk about those comments. But I guess my question is,
well, Sally Miller has made this comment in the chat box. She says, wouldn't non-member board members be asked to join AAUW? And I'm sure if they were eligible to join at the time, that they would be asked. And I understand.
I think that's true. And I think I saw that in one of the comments.
Yes.
From somebody from the national organization.
I'm sure they would be asked.
Yes, this is Sue. Of course they would be asked, and of course they would join if they had, I mean, otherwise they have some interest in AAUW. They maybe have a lot of interest in AAUW. I have not heard about finding wealthy people to be on the board to get more money. I have not heard of that idea. As you all know, right now, a strategic plan committee is working on a new strategic plan for AAUW, And on that committee, people have been asked who are not members of AAUW to come in and help with develop this plan, because they are people coming with new eyes, new ideas, and looking at it quite differently than many of us who have been in AAUW for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years.
Susan, can you remind us how the members, the people that run for the board, are they selected by a nominating committee? Are they invited? Does the nominating committee actively go out and tap people on the shoulder and say, would you run for the board? Or is the idea to run for the board coming from the member, from the person who runs? Okay. How is that work?
It's a combination of both, because of course, when they announce that they are accepting nominations, anybody up until this point who's a member of AAUW can apply. They also, that is one of their main jobs, is looking and listening and hearing and searching for people with these different expertise that we would like, who are members of AAUW. When all of the names are gathered, when the deadline comes, then they have a whole group of people who want to be, or hoping to be nominated. Then they carefully, check all the references and all the, all kinds of things, and then decide how many will run, and those names are then the ones that are chosen.
So the way
in the past, there are people who have never even heard of AAUW, but somehow, and they're searching on the internet, find it, and they think this will be really great for my resume, and they apply. And usually those people are eventually eliminated after references and so forth are checked.
But the only way, but if we, assuming that the kind of people that we're looking for to be one of those potential non-member board members, but I'm assuming somebody on the nominating committee will be actively going out and looking for people like that.
Yes, for sure.
Looking outside the organization and inviting people to come into the organization and run for the. And it probably would be an instance where that person would have some sort of a skill or a set of skills or some kind of expertise that the organization would like to have.
Yes, or somebody who's maybe in another nonprofit or a corporation that is very interested in the very same things that we are, and mainly, I would say, equity. Somebody who has great expertise in that area, more than just somebody who's a great treasurer, or you know what I mean.
Right.
Somebody who would fit in with our mission.
Yes. I see Nan has added a comment that said, I've been surprised at how many people commenting on the website are just aghast at the idea of asking non-members. And I have to say that I'm in agreement with her on that. I was quite surprised to see probably by and large the largest number of negative comments for proposal number 2 were just people who just couldn't understand the idea of going outside the organization. And I'm unfortunately, I think this sort of speaks to some issues that we have within the organization. I think there's a lot of people who don't want the organization to change, and I think that's could potentially be a problem for us.
Yes. Well, this is Sue again, and so the interesting thing is, people, I think, used to and probably still do think that when somebody runs for the board and gets on the board, they deserved it. And I will tell you, that is a term I heard when I was elected. Oh, Sue, you deserved it. Well, what did that mean? That meant that I had been this longtime member and I had been very involved with all this, but this was really important to people. And I think that's where people are coming from. They have always thought that someone who was on the board deserved it, rather than thinking about, what a board is really for.
Right, and I think many of us myself included, our experience with organizations comes from being a member of a professional organization, as opposed to AAUW, which is a membership organization. I belong to several professional librarian organizations, and when you are a member of a professional association, you generally do have to have the degree that goes with that particular profession, and the aims of the organization are to promote the profession. And I know in the organizations, the librarian organizations I've belonged to, we've argued over and over again about, well, should we let paraprofessionals into the association and that sort of thing. But I think there's a lot of that experience out there, and so people forget that AAUW is really a membership organization and not a professional.
And that's a big difference. And I'm glad you brought that up. That is a big difference.
Yeah. Are there any other comments on proposal number 2? Yes, Nan added a comment saying that AAUW is a civic social action membership organization. Well said. That's a good way of putting it. Well, let me move on to proposal number 3 then, and share with you some of the comments that were on the national website about that proposal. On the positive side, you heard Susan telling us that we really can't promote our organization as an equity organization if we're not going to be equitable in how we bring people into the organization. So I think one of the main points in favor of proposal number 3 is that the exclusionary degree requirement is probably hurting us in terms of going out to the public and saying we are an equity organization. Also, I think times have changed, and we now have non-degreed women working in every industry and field. And, in some cases, a college degree is not the final or is not the essential degree or background that you need to have for a particular profession. And it does seem like we may be it does seem like we may be leaving out some people if we continue to have this this degree as a minimum for our membership in our organization. Also, and so therefore, why not let anybody who shares our mission and shares our values be a member of the organization? Makes sense to me. Also, I think, as Susan pointed out, the organization wants to be able to go out and talk to corporations and foundations and to do fundraising, to get backers, much the way AARP and other high-profile not-for-profit organizations do. And we really can't go out to corporations and foundations and ask for money if we have exclusionary requirements to get into our organization. So I think that, as Susan had pointed out, that really does hurt us. Okay, so those are some of the positive comments that you've heard from Susan and that I've seen pop up on the comments. On the other side of the issue, the negative comments, I'll bet at least 50% of them were the tone of them were quite nasty, and people saying things like, you're totally changing the organization. We can't do this. We took a vote on this twice before and voted it down. What's wrong with you people? Don't you, there were a number of those kinds of comments. I won't go any further into those, but it was sort of disappointing to hear or to read those sorts of comments. Some of the more constructive ones that were added were, if the amendment passes, won't the name of the organization be confusing? So there were a couple of comments about, well, you know, we're the American Association of University Women. Won't that be confusing? And I think the counter argument to that is that, you know, you can belong to the Arthritis Foundation and you don't have to have arthritis. You just have to be someone who's interested in the mission of that organization. And I think, as someone else pointed out, you know, you can belong to the YMCA without being young or a man or Christian. So I think we can continue to be called the American Association of University Women and not require a university degree as a form of membership, as a requirement for membership. Also, several people commented that the dropping the degree requirement would take some prestige away from the organization. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I buy into that argument, but I saw that argument more than once. And the other comment that's sort of a corollary of that is that it changes the identity of the association by taking away the requirement. Another more cynical comment is that, again, AAUW is just looking for more money, and this opens up membership to more people, and so therefore we can get more money by doing this. Again, I think that's a very cynical way of looking at it. And one of the more practical comments I saw was somebody suggesting that why can't we just simply have two categories of membership, one for people with, you know, give them the same benefits, but one category is for the people who have the degree and the other category is for the non-degree people. I don't know, Susan, do you want to address that one?
Oh, so you're almost talking about second-class citizens or something?
Well,
second-class members?
It comes from the fact that last year we took a vote on this, you know, this idea of having sort of an, I forget what they called it, some kind of a, what is it? Advocate. You could be an advocate member. But because there were two conflicting amendments, I think people didn't know how to vote. And I think that's part of the reason that neither one of those amendments got the sufficient 2/3 votes.
And that is why we're looking at it today, because you're exactly right. It was confusing. I don't know. I think long ago in the 50s we had associate members, and then it was dropped. Does anybody remember that? It just seems it just seems like if we're talking about gender equity, why are we saying, well, we have two kinds of gender equity or two kinds of equity in our organization? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Marla Kim has pointed out in the chat box that she's aware of branches that have non-degree members who are very active in their branches, but they just don't advertise the fact that they have those members, which is sort of an interesting.
I have run across that too. They are sort of like secret members. They don't tell national about them, and they're not in their bylaws, but they somehow have them, and they're called friends and different names like that, and they can be active. I mean, you know, branches are doing all different kinds of things. Yes, and as far as changing the identity of AAUW, I think that we're defined by our mission: advancing equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. And holding an educational degree is a current membership requirement, and it is not our identity. So to advance equity for women and girls, you do not need to have a college education.
Right, right. I think one of the misconceptions that popped up in some of the comments on the national website were several people made the assumption that somehow the mission of the organization was changing. You know, they said things like, well, so now are we giving up on the idea of being, you know, of being university women who promote a university education for other people? And I mean, I don't know how you address that. I mean, all you can say is, no, we're not changing the mission of the organization. We're simply changing the membership requirement.
Right.
Okay.
You know, our mission has sort of changed. I mean, you know, this is what, 130 some years? And we have changed a little bit along the way, but education is always important to us and will always be important to us.
Let me read some of the comments that are in the chat box. I'm getting behind here. Elaine has added several good comments. Young or newer members join because of our mission of equity for all women and girls, since most women have college degrees. So the degree is no longer an issue. She also says oops, my chat box is moving. More members mean that we have that we can be more effective in accomplishing our mission. Another one of her comments is that young or newer members, oops, that's the same comment. Never mind. Nan has pointed out that local members contribute much to their branch, and that there is a similar outcry when we opened membership to men. Men have not overrun us. I don't think that opening membership cheapens us. It strengthens us. And we allow associate degree members, people with 60 college credits. But what about someone who was unable to complete their degree and got 100 college credits? So that's a good point. I mean, there can be reasons why people didn't make it all the way through 4 years of college, and it does seem a shame to penalize those people. Finally, Nan, go ahead.
I was just going to say about younger members. Younger members actually we're running into, they don't want to be affiliated with an organization that claims to be feminist, but is exclusionary. And even when my daughter joined, who maybe isn't now a younger member, but she's almost 50, I mean, she thought that was the strangest thing we ever asked when she went online to join, and she said, oh my golly, they're asking for where I graduated. I said, yes, I guess you didn't read the small print. But anyway, scroll down and just tell them your university. She said, this is really, really strange.
Yes.
And younger people feel that way.
I agree, and I think things have changed, and I think in 1881 it made sense for a group of university educated women to get together and form an organization, because it was so hard to find other people who fell into that category. But now more than 50% of people who attend colleges and universities are women. And so what we really are advocating for is to make sure that women can get into STEM professions and get into, you know, the kinds of schools that perhaps women, you know, weren't so readily invited into. And I don't think younger women see the barrier quite the same way that even when I was going to school, it was right. A little different.
We have to remember also that, you know, our average age is 70 plus years.
Yeah.
So just think, I mean, if we're not going to be replaced by anybody, then AAUW is not going to be here very long, or it's going to be so different. I mean, there just won't be members or branches or something.
You know, another thing. Thank you, Sue. You know, another thing that occurred to me today when I was looking through these comments was that if you are an outstanding woman, there are certain fields such as being an artist. Let's take that as an example. One of the AAUW fellowships this year went to a young woman who is promoting women artists. Because if you go through the Art Institute of Chicago, you're seeing a whole lot of artwork done by men on the walls. There just hasn't been, women artists have not been promoted the way male artists have. And in a field like that, you can be an outstanding person, but you may not have a college degree, because having a college degree may not have been the crucial way for you to gain the expertise to move up the ladder in your field. I think that possibly is true in music, and I think it might be for actors and actresses. I think we have to recognize that there are some areas, some professions and fields where a college degree is not the thing that you need to be a leader in your field. And so don't we want those women to also be part of our organization?
Indeed we do, don't we?
Yes.
Yes. Elaine says we
Well,
have to change.
Kate, your prediction came true. It appears that just about everyone on the call is in favor of the proposals, and that's good. I personally hope that talking about some of these issues is helping to prepare all of you to go back to your branches and answer questions that people might have about one or more of these proposals.
Okay, yes, this is Sue. Yes, I urge you. It seems like in the past, even board members would say, oh, I'm just going to stay neutral. I'm just going to say, oh, look at both sides. I think the time has come. If you really believe in these three amendments, you need to speak up. You need to tell everybody in your branch and your friends and speak up about it, because now is the time that really this has to be done.
Thank you, Sue. I agree with you. There's quite a few branches represented here today in the webinar, and we can go back and tell our branches, like you said, and promote passing the amendments. And just to remind you, I've put up the slide. Voting opens on April 25th. And I know that it's a big difference this year because the national office, the national board are actually behind these amendments, in particular, removing the degree requirement. And they're encouraging each branch to have a discussion about this and to even bring laptops to a branch meeting and to encourage members to vote at branch meetings, particularly if they don't have computers at home.
Kate, this is Ruth. I would like to, I know Sally's letter, Sally and Jennifer's letter is going to go to the branch presidents, but I hope it will go with a message that the letter get passed on to all of the members of AAUW in Illinois, because I think it's important. I'm a little nervous about just leaving it up to a branch president who is busy that week, not forwarding the letter to other members. So I think an important part of the message should be to make sure that they hear that our leadership is in favor of these proposals. And maybe there's even a way that we could, is there a way they could send their questions to Sally and Jennifer? Or, I mean, is there a way for someone to interact with someone in state leadership if they've got a question or comment?
Ruth, this is Sally, and I can certainly encourage the branch presidents to do that, and my email will be on it, and so I'd be glad to have any questions. Another thing I want to mention, at our state convention, April 27 and 28, hopefully we're going to have a laptop there so people can vote during the breaks at the state convention.
That's good.
Well, thank you, Sally. Does anybody else anything to say? I hope everyone found the webinar useful and learnt some more arguments for discussing the amendments with other members. And I hope that you will join us next month when Lisa Cherry will be talking about equal pay. And I'll say good night. Thank you for joining us.